Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning again, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the third of a three-part series. We've talked about dealing with burnout, tools for dealing with depression and anxiety, and today we're going to be talking about grief and loss as a caregiver. I'm Katie Flores, and I'll be moderating today. If you have questions throughout the presentation today, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure we have time to address everyone's comments and questions. I would like to introduce Kimberly Knight. Kimberly is the director of the Caregiver Support Program at the Senior Source.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Katie, for the wonderful introduction. And we are so happy to have everyone here joining us today for our third program in this series that we've been doing. Self-care is so important to caregivers, and we at the Senior Source want to be a support to caregivers, and we're just happy to provide these classes. Most of you, I think, have heard about the Senior Source, but just in case you have not, I just want to share with you a little bit of information about our organization. So the Senior Source is a nonprofit that's located in Dallas, Texas, and we have been serving the community for 60 years. Our mission at the Senior Source is to enhance the quality of life for older adults in Dallas. And we do that every day through the programs and services we offer in an effort to making older better. And that's what we like to do here at the Senior Source. The Caregiver Support Program itself, which I am the director of, we do that through providing these services. We provide information and resources for support and assistance. We also conduct care consultations with individuals and with families. So what a care consultation is just when we sit down and we talk to you one-on-one about your loved one, what's going on in your caregiving journey. And we provide information and resources, like I said before, to help meet those needs. Oftentimes, caregivers are kind of just thrust into this role. Sometimes it's unexpected. You're not a professional and you may not know where to start or what to do. So we're here to help guide you along the way by listening, by supporting, and by giving you information and resources to meet your needs. In addition to that, we also have support groups for caregivers. Many times when people hear support group, they kind of shy away from it or are like, oh no, that's not for me. But support groups can be a powerful tool for a caregiver. It's a great place to come to just vent to a group of people that understand what you're going through. Sometimes when you're caregiving, it is hard, it can be difficult, it can be stressful, as well as rewarding. And so it's a group of people that you can come to and they can cheer you on in the successful days. They can listen to you when you're having a down moment, and they can give you advice because they've been there in some situations. They know doctors to go to in town. They know different resources or little tricks of the trade that have worked for them throughout their caregiving journey. And they're always there to share that information. So a support group can be a great benefit. You know, it's not just about venting, but it's also about learning and just getting information that you need. Also, we have caregiver education and seminars that we offer. Much like what you're getting ready to partake in today, we have education classes every month. You can go to our website at thesenioursource.org and see all of our education offerings throughout the rest of the year. And then we offer incontinence supplies. Incontinence supplies are just different, the word I'm looking for? Incontinence supplies are sometimes things people need how am I doing this? But anyway, incontinence supplies are things that people need. And if you are in need of incontinence supplies, we are a resource for you in that area. As a caregiver, sometimes these things can be very expensive. And so this is one of the ways we can just take a little bit of the burden off of you and provide them to you if you are caring for someone who is in need of incontinence supplies. These are some of the things that we do through the Caregiver Support Program and much more. And this is just a slide that tells you when our support groups take place. We meet once a month currently, the third Tuesday and third Wednesday of the month. And as you see, they're at different times. On Tuesday, it's from 11:30 to 1. On Wednesday, we meet from 6 to 7:30. And then we also have a Spanish language support group that meets on Thursdays, and they meet from 11:30 to 1 as well. Next slide. And here's the way in which you can contact us. You can call us at 214-823-5700 to reach us at the Senior Source. But in addition to the Caregiver Support Program, we also have an Elder Financial Safety Center where they focus on utility assistance, helping older adults find employment. They also can answer questions about Medicare and Medicaid, and also help you do some financial planning for retirement. We have a guardianship program. If you're ever in need of a guardian, they're typically court appointed. However, we do house the guardians that are in this area, at least some of them, and we do have that program here. We also have a long-term care ombudsman program. Long-term care ombudsmen are individuals who go out and advocate on behalf of the person who may be living in a long-term care community. Ombudsman is a funny word, but if you're ever in need of one, you can always call the Senior Source and they would be more than happy to help you. Ombudsmen, like I said, they help the individual who's in a long-term care community. Maybe they're having an issue and they need someone to speak on their behalf, but they also can tell you about long-term care communities. They know the different types that are out there. They know kind of the rating that they have, and they can help you navigate the process of choosing the right long-term care community. And then we have volunteer programs for older adults through RSVP and foster grandparents and our Senior Companion program. Senior Companions are individuals that can come out and be in your home. They don't do medical services, but they can be a buddy to your loved one and help maybe run small errands and do just kind of small things around the house and just be a companion, be a friend to them so they're not so lonely during the day. So those are all of the services we offer here at the Senior Source. We're more than happy to help you along the way in your journey. If you need anything, please feel free to give us a call or go to our website and see all the different ways we can be a support to you. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Katie.
Thank you, Kimberly. Before we get started, we like to ask a few questions to get an idea of who our audience is today. So I'm going to pop up a few poll questions. So if you are able to see your screen, please take a second to answer these questions. How did you hear about today's webinar? Wow, our emails are working, Kimberly. 100% heard about today through an email blast. Next question, tell us what type of caregiver are you? Are you a family caregiver, a professional caregiver, or both? Nice, we have a good mix today of all, so that's great. And last question, tell us a little bit about your experience. Are you brand new or have you been doing this for a while? No newbies. We got some pros today. Great to know. Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to introduce Kimberly Pearson. Kimberly is the CEO and Clinical Director of Loving Yourself Well Counseling Agency. Take it away, Kimberly.
Hello, everybody. This is going to be our last session for this series. I am going to share my screen at this moment. And we'll get right into the presentation. So this is a bit of a continuation from last week, but I see we have probably quite a few new people here. So I'm going to quickly give a small recap of how we ended last week, because I want us to kind of level set our journey through grief and loss recovery for caregivers. So last week I ended our session, our conversation, with a theoretical foundation of how we get to a place where we are able to rebound from from adversity, from loss, and what processes, what steps do we typically go through to make that happen. I, as Katie mentioned, I'm a clinical a licensed professional counselor, and I use a theoretical foundation called rational emotive behavior therapy. It's really brief, so it allows individuals to move through a cycle of change or a cycle of resetting pretty quickly. And so what we look at, the way I approach even grief and loss, the recovery process of that is through these 5 modalities or 5 ways to view the process. First, we have a activating event, the loss, whether it's the loss of a loved one, the loss of property, the loss of a life you once knew, that would be the activating event. Then we look at what we believe about that loss. I believe that when you can align your heart, which is what you believe, with your thoughts, your mind, it will actually influence how you behave. So I'm going to say that again. Whatever you believe, which would be in your heart, will influence your mind, which will be your thoughts, and how you think is going to affect how you behave or what you feel. And so we want to, as we have these activating events, these losses that we have experienced, we have a belief around those. We have something that we really have considered as either good or bad. And the consequences of what that belief is, whether or not you are going to be able to experience this in a self-helping way or a self-defeating way. If it is self-defeating, if it is not helping you, what we would call irrational, it is if the way I am experiencing my loss is affecting me in a negative way, then I want to listen and explore my beliefs, and anything that is any parts of my beliefs that are not working for me, I want to dispute them. I want to figure out a better way to build a belief system or a belief about that activating event that's going to be helping me. And as a result, I will have a new belief that is going to create new consequences. And as a result, I may have some of my human experiences. I'm still going to feel sad. I'm still going to have my moments of loneliness. I'm still going to go through my cycle of grief, but I may have a different experience or a different outcome. So that's our level setting. What are we going to do today? Today, I love this slide here because it says we begin with the end in mind. I often quote Stephen Covey quote, which is a part of the 7 Habits of Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. I want to know where I'm trying to go. What is this? What am I going to look for in my space of healing, and as I am going through my process of grief? So first, we're going to learn how to live within the reality of the death and the loss. We must learn how to that our life is different, and we have to learn how to live with a different life. It is not what it used to be. It is not what we wanted it to be in most cases, but it is our reality, and we have to learn how to live within that state. Second, we want to reorganize our relationships or our relationship with the person who is no longer with us, or the things that we have lost. We have to figure out, now, what does this look like for me? How do I still see that individual as a valuable component of my life, because when they were on this side of life, I was able to touch them. I was able to talk to them, and I enjoyed the relationship that I had with them. And it was a valuable relationship, or the things that I had was valuable to me, the life that I had. So now I have to learn how to reorganize myself around my new reality, but I want to do that in a very self-helping way. And last, we want to figure out, how do we envision ways to live a fulfilling life without the deceased loved one, without the thing or the person that was once a major component of our life. So how do we, now I got to figure out, I want to be able to see it. I want to be able to understand it, have hope in it. So I want to be able to envision it. So how do we do this? How do we make this happen? I break these down into 4 components. First, there is self-awareness. It is important that we become aware of our emotions within this experience of grief. We understand what those emotions mean, when we are having the emotions, how these emotions are going to affect other people, including, my family and friends, as well as myself. How is it going to affect us? The second component is integration. We want to integrate the ideas of my new belief, the ideas of the loss, and we want to avoid complicated grief. And I'm going to define complicated grief in a few more slides here, but integration is going to be the way that I begin the process of integrating my loss in a way that keeps me moving forward. Third, disputation. I need to dispute any self-defeating beliefs that makes my grief complicated. And again, these are slides that we're going to cover later, but one thing I use is my faith. I use my faith to dispute anything that's going to make my grief complicated. Last is expectations. I want to create new effective beliefs that increase self-helping beliefs. So we're going to go through these steps and I'll explain them as we go. Okay, first, self-awareness. Remember, in self-awareness, we are going to become aware of the emotions that we experience during the grief process. How do we do this? We want to explore our beliefs, that we want to explore the beliefs in a way that it facilitates self-awareness. And remember, through self-awareness, we gain clarity within the unknown. And of course, death is the unknown. If whatever is going to happen after the loss is an unknown. So through my self-awareness, I will gain clarity in that, while also creating meaning about the death, meaning about the experience in a productive and therapeutic manner. That's what I'm going to do in this space of self-awareness. So this is where we would explore our 5 stages of grief. And the 5 stages of grief are the different types of emotions, or different types of behaviors that we would experience while we are in the grieving process. Now, the thing about the 5 stages of grief is it's not a cycle. So it's not like you're going to go from denial to anger to bargaining to depression and then acceptance. It's saying that you will experience one of these behaviors, one of these behavior types at any given moment. And the self-awareness is you being aware that this is what I am experiencing today. I understand it. I am aware of it. And I also am going to build my meaning and the context of my grief around this place that I am today. Again, it is not that you're going to try to avoid any of this, because the grief process is essential. It is a meaningful important part of your ability to move to acceptance. You don't want, there is going to be a stage when you experience denial. And denial is displayed with avoidance, confusion, shock, and even fear. So it is highly possible that if something happens unexpectedly, of course, there's going to be shock and fear. There are some cases where the death or the loss is a very slow process, some in the process of Alzheimer's or a terminal illness, it's going to be a long process. And there may be, in that long process, there may be times when you really just want to avoid the reality that this is really happening. Or the confusion of, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? Why couldn't this happen to someone else? So there will be moments where you will experience some type of denial. There's also going to be moments when you experience anger. And anger is displayed in bouts of frustration, irritation, or anxiety. A lot of times when clients come to visit with me and they're dealing with grief, anger is where they are and what they're experiencing, where they got stuck. And a lot of times they may even be angry with the hospital because they feel like the type of care that their loved one had received during their end of life was not adequate. Or they may even be angry with loved ones. I often share the story about my grief process with my grandmother. And after she passed away, I was so angry with my family. I did not like the way they handled her stuff, her things. And I was so upset. And I often say, my grandmother came to me and said, Kim, I am not my stuff. Let it go. I am not my stuff. But sometimes that anger can come out and display itself in behaviors that really affect your relationship with other people. But understanding that that is a part of the grief process will allow you to have a healthy belief system around it so that you can move through it with ease. The third one that you may experience or you're going to experience is bargaining, feeling overwhelmed, helpless, and you also move into a fight mode where you begin to say, why couldn't it been me? I would have given my whole life for this. I would have done something different. That's a normal step. That's a normal process. The fourth one is depression. And as I mentioned last week in our workshop, the layman's definition of depression is anger turned inward. Anger turned inward. That is when something outside of you happens that you absolutely cannot change. You can't fix it. And you are angry that you cannot fix it. And you turn that anger within yourself, onto yourself, and you feel helpless and hopeless about it. Anger turned inward. And so during this depression, it may be difficult for you to find adequate, effective meaning, productive meaning in the process. And so, there may be days where you go from anger to depression to bargaining, from bargaining to denial, from denial back to anger. These are going to be the natural stages of life. And then finally, you are going to get to a point where you begin to accept the loss and you begin to integrate it in your life. And by integrating it, you will begin to explore options for life, a new plan. How will you live in a new way and moving forward? The other part about the 5 stages of grief is, as you are experiencing this yourself, it's important to know that other people, including family members, are experiencing it as well. So the more self-aware you are about this process, the easier it is for you to identify it with your loved ones or with the others that you're interacting with. So when you see that, when you're able to be gentle with yourself, then you're able to be gentle with others. So instead of letting the anger just govern and create more havoc in your life, you may be able, by your self-awareness, you will be able to pause and say, I know that this person is grieving. Their behavior may not be appropriate at this time, but their behavior is their way of grieving. And so that self-awareness piece is going to affect how you go through the grief process. Remember what I said in the first slide. Whatever I believe is going to affect my consequences. So if I believe that the individual is grieving, I'm going to have a little bit more compassion for them. That's going to change how I respond. So anger, I may not become angry about something that I see because I know that they are grieving because I've done it. I've had that. So this part is very important to you being able to manage not only yourself, but also manage relationship with others. So using self-awareness to examine what you believe. First, explore. Feel free to explore your beliefs about death through the awareness of these stages. As I am, as you are going through this, one thing I ask my clients when I'm working with them through the grief process. At the beginning of every session, I say, where are you in the process? Where are you in the stages of grief today? Because it changes every day. Today I may feel angry, and tomorrow I may have some acceptance. I may feel a little like, okay, I know I can do this. I know that I may not have what I used to have. I don't have the person in my life anymore, but I'm feeling a little easy about it. And mind you, this is never about you letting go of the other person or letting go of what you wanted to happen. This is you beginning to accept that that thing is not available to you, and you need to figure out a new way to interact with it so that it can still be beneficial, even though it is not there the way you are used to it being there. So you want to explore your beliefs about it through these stages every day, figuring out where you are, grounding yourself, understanding the consequences of it, and then you work through that day. Second, share stories about the deceased loved one or about the things that you lost in order to facilitate awareness. A lot of times people don't want to talk, they go into isolation. Of course, isolation is a huge sign of depression. So people may want to isolate, or, they feel like if they talk about it, they'll think about it, and they don't want to think about it because that makes them have negative emotions. But the actual opposite really happens. When I hear people share stories about their loved one who has gone on, who has transitioned, they actually get joy from it. They actually start to laugh and have in those memories of what was is like a reset for them, and they feel better. They feel worse when they are not able to talk about them. So as caregivers who may be working with individuals who may even have lost someone, allow them to have the conversation. Allow them to have the conversation, and you have the conversation. So if you have family members that would that all of you all are grieving through this process together, have a time where y'all sit down and talk about what is going on and what was and what can be, and use your experience to propel you to a new awareness, to a new level of functioning so that you are able to move through this process. Third, permit authentic expressions of emotions as you share your stories of the deceased loved one. So when I say permit authentic expression, that's in contrast to telling someone, get over it, or saying to someone things like, you're not in the faith-based community, a lot of times we'll hear words like you don't have any faith, or don't cry about it. He's in a better place. He or she is in a better place. If you want them with you, they're not in a better place. For you, or for the person who is grieving, the better place is with them. And so often, because people will respond that way, we will suppress our authentic expression, and that then will actually make the grief complicated because we're holding on to it. We're not able to go through the grief process effectively. So definitely always encourage others, and you allow yourself to express your emotions authentically. If you are upset, then say it. I'm angry about this. If you're in denial and you're just not ready to move forward, you just don't want to deal with it. It's okay to say that. I don't want to deal with that today. I just don't want to do it today. It's okay. Expressing that and allowing yourself to have those authentic expressions will allow you to move through, to integrate the loss in a more effective way. And then the last thing is exercise unconditional acceptance. This, again, is a component of what we did last week when we talked about depression and anxiety. Allowing yourself unconditional acceptance is you saying, I am good with me in this space. I may not be perfect. I may have imperfect emotions or imperfect behavior, or I may not necessarily say the right things at the right time. And I know that people may feel different about how I am expressing myself, but I got to be okay with me because I'm grieving. And my grief may not look like everybody else's grief. My grief may be quiet and just kind of staunched. My grief may be overly expressive. Whatever your grief is, however you grieve is your way of grieving. And two people will not grieve the same way. So accepting yourself unconditionally, knowing that you're not perfect, that you are just trying to figure it out like everybody else, that allows you to avoid any guilt, feelings of guilt, any shame that actually creates traumatic experiences. It allows you to avoid all that. And again, allows you to move through the stages of grief without any complication. So integration. Remember, integration is when we integrate the idea of the loss, and it allows us to avoid, again, complicated grief. Remember our steps. First, we've had this activating event, the loss, the death. And then we are going to explore what we believe through our stages of grief. If I'm in a stage of denial, I really want to understand, what is this denial about? Why, what is making me not really want to explore why, this incident, and it may be very legitimate reasons. You just really may not feel like doing it. You may be tired. You may be overwhelmed by it. So we want to explore that through those stages. And now we're at C, consequences. How am I displaying this? Am I able to integrate this experience in my life in a non-complicated way? Integration allows you to extend your relationship. the relationship you shared with the loved one on this side of life to the other side of life. Now, this is my definition. This is what I like. I call it a chemism because I'm always coming up with these little phrases. Grief is the process of extending the love you have for that loved one from this side of life to the other side of life. We know how to love them on this side of life. We know we touch them, we smell them, we talk to them, we see them. So we have mastered the process of loving them on this side of life. But on the other side of life, that is an unknown for us. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know how to do it. Some people may say, that person is now in the grave and they just simply no longer exist anymore. Now, I would have to ask, is that belief helping you or is it hurting you? Some people may believe that a person transitions to another stage of life or another stage of consciousness, and they are able to become angels, or they may even be reincarnated. Whatever the belief is about the other side of life, we have to figure out, how do we extend that love from this side of life to the other side of life? And that, for me, is the grief process. Now, there are several types of grief. First, bereavement. Bereavement is when you have lost someone. It's like the immediate thing bereavement is when you've lost someone, and it is the process. It is the response of grief. I am bereaved. Then there is acute grief, and that's the initial response. When it first happens, there is a heightened emotions. The loss is very, very deep. And again, it is not uncommon for you to either be in denial or to be angry. It is not uncommon for those expressions of emotions to be very exaggerated, very uncontrolled. I can't think of the word I used last week. Unregulated. Have extreme unregulated emotions when a person is going through acute grief. I've used this word quite often. Complicated grief. Complicated is a form of prolonged acute grief that interferes with integrated grief. And complicated grief can happen when you have multiple hits at one time. It becomes complicated. COVID is one thing that created a lot of complicated grief because people lost multiple family members within a very short period of time. I think that a part of us has been and continue to experience complicated grief because we're dealing with several losses. If I lost my loved one, and I am also losing my home at the same time, and I'm losing my life that I once knew at the same time, it will complicate it. And that heightened, unregulated emotions will continue to cycle over and over and over. And you don't even have an opportunity to integrate that in your daily life because they're coming and they're hitting it so frequently. Then there's mourning. Mourning is an array of emotions or psychological processes in response to the loss. And it actually sets the facilitation of acceptance. So when you're mourning, it's not complicated, it's not acute. It's like the low grade process. Like I'm learning to integrate. I am learning to extend that love from this side of life to the other side of life. I'm doing it on a day-to-day basis. I may not be perfect at it. It may look a little unregulated at times, but I'm walking through it. And then there's this part that we're at now, the integration of grief. integrated grief. It is the permanent way of integrating the loss to support the ongoing renewing of life. I am able to allow myself to process the death of my loved one or the loss that I have received or experienced in a way that I can celebrate, I can continue to celebrate, I can continue to make meaning, and I can still be productive. And I know when it's acute and when it's complicated, it is difficult to even imagine acceptance, but that is the goal. So if we examine the consequences of our beliefs, we would want to do this through several processes. One is, despite the negative feeling of grief, understand that faith can be used as an effective way to deal with negative feelings. The reason why I turn to faith, regardless of any religious affiliation or even if it's agnostic, I just believe that we all have to have something bigger than us that we believe in, because our human abilities are so limited that things can be real complicated when we're trying to live in the unknown. And faith can give us something to hang on to, that we can build a belief around that is unknown. And so I do ask often, my clients, what is their belief about death? How do they think what do they think a person experience after death? I'm okay with having a vivid imagination. I told someone just yesterday, I said, I would like to think that when I die, my consciousness is going to change. I won't need this shell of a body. It's only useful on this side of life. So that thing will be deteriorating. But my consciousness will evolve or will transcend to another state. And in that other state, I may be witnessing what's going on in this consciousness, or I may just decide I may have a different experience. I don't know if that's true. Nobody ever died and came back and told me what happens. I actually use that because it just lets me integrate the losses that I've experienced in a way that keeps me moving forward. So I believe that it is healthy for us to have something bigger than us that we can grab hold to help us process and help us integrate the losses that we experience in life. However, when grief is acute or complicated, the emotions are too raw to regulate. And objectively, and our objectivity is skewed. There is nothing that's going to be able to bring you to a level of functioning when it is acute and it is complicated. The one thing that you have in your arsenal is your unconditional acceptance of self. When it is acute and it is complicated, understand you are doing the best you can. You're trying, and it's very difficult, and you're doing the best you can. There is no reason to put any pressure on yourself to get through the cycle of grief when it is acute and when it's complicated. Actually, there's really no effort, no reason to force yourself through it at any point in it. It's going to happen naturally because it's a part of the human experience. But when it is acute and it's complicated, it makes it just more difficult. And if that is where any of the listeners are today or the viewers are today, this is it. Don't push yourself to be anything other than acute and complicated. And that way, you won't go into this, you won't get stuck in a state of in a state of shame or guilt, and making this process even more traumatic than what it probably already is. It's also impossible to intellectualize or to rationalize the what, when, or why of death when grief is acute and complicated. I know that we often want to label things and we want to feel like we have a sense of control over things, even death. We want answers. Why did my loved one have to die like this? Even when it's old age. Again, my grandmother, she was like 2 weeks from being 100 when she transitioned, and I was at the hospital with her, and I'm on the phone with the doctors saying, okay, she can take the surgery now. Go ahead and give her the surgery. And the doctor said, oh, ma'am, I'm sorry, you think you're making this decision? No, her body has already made the decision. And in that moment, I realized, okay, I can't intellectualize or try to control this. I'm going to have to surrender to this process of death so that I don't make it acute and complicated. Death is a part of life. It is the last experience of our human existence, and we all are going to surrender to it at some point in life. So again, it is important that we figure out a way to integrate all of that beliefs, or those beliefs around that, so that we can get through it. Last, to achieve integrated grief, we must learn how to integrate the memories of the deceased loved one into our new roles, our new routines, and even new connections in a way that allow us to live a new way. And we can, that again seems very unachievable, like especially when I am going through my cycle of grief. I use faith as a way to help me navigate that space, because by me allowing myself to understand that my loved one has transitioned to a different consciousness, or they are even either witnessing what I'm going through, or they are. Is everybody still there? My screen just changed. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Something happened to my screen. Okay, thank you. As I am able to explore a life without my loved one, I'm able to integrate them because I still talk to them. I still see them as beneficial in my life. I tease and I say jokingly to a lot of my friends and even my colleagues and even my clients that there are moments that I call my grandmother and I'm like, Mommy, I know that you're up there somewhere, and I don't know how it works where you are, but if I'm going through something, I say, Mommy, I want you to go talk to the Lord about it and tell him to send me some help. And for me, that brings me peace. I don't know if it really happens. I don't have a clue if that how it goes. But for me, in my human experience, I need to get through this. I need to be able to walk through this, and I need to see her as a continued benefit to me. The idea or the belief that there is no her and she is no longer accessible, that for me is a little bit too painful. I want to be able to think of her. I want to be able to celebrate her. So I use a belief that is going to help me do that, because as I said earlier, we're all going to walk through that door. We're all going to transition at some point. And the people that we see who is going to experience any effects of that is going to be the people that are left on this side of life. So we have to figure out our new way, a new role, our new routines, our new connections with how that loved one now integrates with that. Okay, so again, the integration is a way to help us move closer to acceptance. And under this, we're going to explore new options as we are integrating our deceased, the idea of the things that we lost or the people that we lost into our new normal. We may look at new resources, or we may take on new roles. You know, in the case of a spouse who has lost their partner, they now may be the primary financial provider in the home. They may be the single parent in the home, or they may need different help. They may need a senior source to help them figure out like how to pay bills now. How do I take care of the home that I'm living in? So you'll begin to explore new options. Then you'll start to create a new normal, and you'll start managing the changes in the now new life, changes in routines. You may begin to spend more time with family members that you otherwise did not have time for. You may even take on a new job. You know, there will be a new normal, and you'll have the integration of that is exploring how do you manage the routines around the new normal. And then you'll begin to move on, move forward. Life continues, cultivating a new way of life. So now we have to dispute anything that's going to hinder us. So how do we get there? We want to be able to dispute self-defeating beliefs that makes this grief complicated, makes the whole process complicated. Anything that is going to hinder your ability to integrate must be disputed. I keep saying this because this is so important. We're all going to walk through that door. And we all got to figure out, how do we who are on this side of life integrate that process in this side of our life? Looking at our theoretical concept, we have the loss that has beliefs, that has consequences, and now we're going to dispute these, though any negative consequences. So disputing self-beliefs and replacing them, we're going to dispute any self-defeating beliefs and replace them with self-helping beliefs. The most challenging part of grief is getting to the stage of acceptance. And again, and I always have to build in the caveat that acute and complications during the grief process is going to delay this, and that is okay. Everyone will get there within their own time. We take all of this and layer it with unconditional acceptance of self as we walk through this. But our whole process is to get to the stage of acceptance. So we do this as we are called to accept the realities of life. Because again, I've said most of this before, we know on this side of life, things are temporary, and change is inevitable. We do that every day. Everything about our life over here is temporary, and we will evolve. Things will change. I look at myself in the mirror today, and I absolutely do not look like the 20-year-old Kim. I am changing every day. This means that a healthy way to adapt to the changes in life and accept this final stage allows us to take what seems impossible and uncomfortable, and we move it to being probable and even hopeful. So again, any beliefs that I have, I need to take it from being impossible, uncomfortable, and move it to being probable and hopeful. That is the way I'm going to look at how I will dispute this. Any negative beliefs. So that is that, and that would be anything. That would be, I will not spend a lot of my time trying to give people a way to dispute this, to use disputation, because it is their experience. As a clinician, I'm always going to ask, is that helping you? I'm always going to ask, how are you responding to the thing that you believe? If it is leaving me stuck in a place of that is completely impossible, or I'm extremely uncomfortable with that, I'm going to figure out a way to move it to probable and helpful. So that is disputation. Small segment. Expectations. Okay. So again, we've gone from self-awareness to integration to disputation, and now we're at expectations. Expectations is where we begin to create new effective beliefs that increases self-helping behavior. We've seen this slide again, and this completes our theoretical process, how we would do this in a cognitive way, to get us past the complicated or even the acute grief. So remember, change is inevitable, and death. And if we can look at death as not a ending of something, but as a new beginning of something, then it can help us get through the process. We have a choice in this. We can either explore our process of grief and our stages of grief as a way of ending something, or we can explore it as a way of beginning something. Nobody is going to stop you from doing it either way. This is your choice. And if you decide to look at it as the ending of something, I would explore how that is making you feel. What are the consequences of that? And if you tell me I'm uncomfortable with it, it makes me uncomfortable, I'm going to challenge you to let's look at it through a different lens. Let's look at it through a lens of new beginning. And so in this, we want to determine ways to celebrate life lived, and even life after the deceased one. This is where sharing the story becomes extremely important. I would often look at what that person brought to my life. Some of the experiences that I had that I may not have had that person not been in my life. I am extremely thankful for the opportunity to have loved, to have had that person connected to me. And regardless if I had them today, or if I had them for one day, or if I had them for 100 days, I enjoyed my life with them. And so I will figure out a way to celebrate them. You know, funerals and end of life ceremonies are now becoming more of a celebration of life. And we've learned that is probably the most self-helping way to do this, as opposed to mourning, continuing the process of mourning. So working through that, and you figuring out, how do I celebrate this life that this person lived? And then I'm going to move to the afterlife, and I want to figure out, how do I use what this person was, and even who this person is now, as a self-helping way to move toward acceptance. I want to promote opportunities to increase positive emotions. I want to maybe even go to the places that we once traveled together. I've heard of people planting a tree in their yard as a memorial to the memory of their loved one. And every day they go out and they water the plant and water the tree, and that gives them a positive emotion. So I want to increase opportunities to do that. I also want to focus on building bonds with my family and my friends, even around the celebration of that person. Now, I'm very transparent. I'm one of those counselors that will definitely disclose some of my own personal stuff, because I do believe in the therapeutic relationship. And how do you have a relationship when it's one-sided? So I share a lot of my personal stuff. And I have a family member that when I was in the angry stage, I didn't think that relationship would ever recover. But as I began to go through the stages of grief and I began to integrate my grandmother into my current life, one thing that I was able to remember was my grandmother was a loving person, and she would never hold on to bitterness. And if I am going to be her legacy, then I absolutely cannot hold on to any bitterness toward my loved one. And so I had to continue to build the bond with that particular brother. I also said my grandmother loved him. My grandmother loved him. He was my oldest brother and her first grandson, and she loved him. And if my only reason for building the bond and continuing the relationship is to maintain her legacy, then that really is good enough for me, because she deserved that. I am celebrating her through that. And so when we focus on building bonds, we want to focus on building bonds in a ways that celebrate the loved one or celebrate the thing that we lost. And so number 3 is really important, building bonds with family and friends. We also want to allow opportunities to have our first vacation without the loved one, our first time paying bills without the loved one, our first. We're going to have a lot of first. And these are opportunities to celebrate the fact that you did it. Even when you didn't think it was possible, you did it. And those small victories, those small milestones will help you increase opportunities for positive emotions. And so as you are beginning to integrate the loss and moving toward acceptance, you will celebrate life on this side and the other side, increase positive emotions, continue to build bonds with your family and your friends, and celebrate your first. Look for your first, identify them, and that will help you move to acceptance. Now, that is my presentation for today. I think we are still on schedule. Perfect. Any questions and answers? And let me say this before I finish. This is my last workshop with the source. So first, I want to thank the source for allowing me to present to this group. I've enjoyed every moment. I also want to hear your feedback. I've not pushed for question and answers, but since this is my last one, I'm going to ask you all to give me a little feedback. It helps me to kind of know where things are needing to be even more explained, or it helps me it affirms the work that I do. So please, if you don't mind, let's hear some feedback on the presentation.
Thank you, Kimberly. This was really helpful for me personally, and I think probably everyone else on the call. I do see a couple hands raised, so I'm going to allow you to talk. Verda, if you had a comment or question, we should be able to hear you unless you want to drop it in the chat. Also, Lucy Watson had her hand raised. So Lucy, if you wanted to say something.
Yes, I enjoyed everything. And I thank you because I have been through at least about 6, going through different griefs in my family. Thank you for sharing good, great light on each and every one. It made me look at each and every one in a different way. And I thank you for your program. It was very helpful to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy. Appreciate
That's
it.
awesome. Also, I did drop a handout into the chat. If you guys want to grab that, you can save it to your device and or print it. So you'll have some valuable information you can keep there. And we did have some other questions in the Q&A. So this one I was going to ask, but someone else did. My wife has entered advanced stage of Alzheimer's, so even though she's still alive, her former self is gone and she is slowly dying. I'm not visiting her as often and staying a shorter length of time. She's in a memory care facility. I guess this is the denial part of the grief process. Any thoughts on how dealing with this kind of grief is different from someone who actually died?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful question. My grandfather had a slow process through dementia and Alzheimer's. And as I walked through that process with him, I began to understand the blessing in that it gave me the opportunity to show my last expression of love. And instead of it being acute, instead of it being complicated, I was able to say my goodbyes. I was able to finalize my emotions in that space while they were on this side of life. And so when he passed away, it was truly a celebration. I knew that he had completed his existence, his cycle of life on this side. I knew that I looked at everything that he had done, how he had contributed not only to my life, but how he contributed to the life of others. And when he passed away, I was able to say, amen. Okay. But only reason I was able to do that was because I was able to walk through the process of acceptance without any complications. So I hope that helps. And you can tell me if that answers your question.
That's great. This question may be for both Kimberlys. Are there any free counseling services Medicare does not cover without a large copay?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that there are counselors that if you explain to them what your income is, some of them may even do pro bono. I know that as a part of our ethical responsibility, we are supposed to take on at least one pro bono case actively. That's just our payback to the field. So I would definitely explore ask counselors or talk to any counselor about doing a pro bono case or anything that's more within a discounted amount that is in line with your income.
And I would also just add to that, also, there are counseling services that they operate on a sliding scale fee. And they do take income or monies into consideration as to what their fee would be. But that's also a good place sometimes to tap into your centers of faith, because they have pastoral counselors on staff. And even if it's not your counseling, not your church per se, typically they still wouldn't turn a person away if they were in need of counseling services. In addition to that, when I think about that, I think about Concord. They have Harmony Counseling Center. And I know that they work with people on a sliding scale type of fee and take in and people sometimes that maybe are not able to pay for counseling services. So there are some agencies that are out there, like Kimberly said, you just really have to kind of talk to them one-on-one and let them know about your situation. And we can also provide you some of the names of those places we were just mentioning, so you can call them for yourself. and then just inquire.
Thank you. Couple questions, maybe these are for you, Kimberly Knight. I know that we are recording today, but there was someone who wants to be able to listen to this webinar later with a family member. So just how can today's attendees know how to access the recording?
So now that we're completely through with the series, all three you'll be able to find the links on YouTube. I would say it would take probably the beginning of next week, because I have to work with our marketing team to have that happen. But you would find them up on YouTube next week.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then one other question, where can I get more information on foster grandparents? I'm not fully sure what questions, but is that something Senior Source deals with?
It is. It's one of our volunteer programs, and it's wonderful, wonderful. A wonderful program. Basically, the foster grandparents, they go into schools and they just love on the little kiddos and help in the classrooms, and I was going to say even daycare facilities. And so it's a really, really great program. You can find more information on our website. Actually, they have a section of our website, and I can drop that in the chat too before we get off. So, but you can find more information on our website.
Great, thank you. And then before we wrap up, any last questions or comments, feel free to drop in the chat. But I did want to let you know when the webinar ends today, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen. Please take a minute to complete that so we can just get more of your insights and help provide great webinars like today's.
I'm waiting. I'm getting the link.
We had a comment. Thank you for these webinars. And also, Kimberly Pearson, your response to that, grieving a loved one who hasn't actually passed yet, that was helpful to the person who asked. And helpful to me too. I'll ask one last question while Kimberly's looking this up. Because it came to my mind while you were talking today, Kimberly. What would be your best suggestion or advice to help as a friend to help someone who I see struggling with the grief process? Obviously, everyone goes through it at a different pace and at different levels and times, but I'm starting to see signs of it damaging relationships really close to her. So just as a friend, do you have suggestions how I could help?
Yes, a couple. Well, first of all, share the story. That is the biggest part of moving through the grief process. There's a lot of research done on the change in how a person experiences something when they're able to talk about it. When they feel free to take the words out of your head and put it out in the atmosphere. That's what I call it. So when you're able to express it, it takes on a whole nother form. So when it's in your head, it may be complicated because it's wrapping those thoughts around other negative thoughts. But when they actually say it and they're talking about it, they're able to process it and release it. And they even hear themselves think. They hear themselves may have, some unhealthy ways of thinking and talking. And so you as a friend being present and letting them talk about it, sharing it with them. The other thing is never treat them as if they are a burden or they need to end the grief process. Encourage them to have the grief process. Encourage them to experience unconditional acceptance of self and others. And as it's not always we give advice. We don't have to rescue people. We don't have to stop them from doing anything. That's more because we're uncomfortable with it. So you build your level of tolerance with what is uncomfortable so that you can be present with them on an ongoing basis without making them feel like they need to stop. So
that's very helpful. Thank you. All right, well, we are about 15 minutes after. Thanks everyone for staying on a little longer today. And again, this was so helpful, Kimberly. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
both,
you.
Kimberlys.
I was gonna say, and Kimberly Pearson, we at the Senior Source so appreciate your expertise and knowledge and just your willingness to share with us and with all the participants that have come to the sessions. And so we thank you so very much, and we look forward to our next sessions with you in the near future. So thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Have a nice day.